World of Warcraft has seen some very dark times. Content droughts, design fiascos, scandals, systems too complex for their own good, and radio silence as community engagement hits an all-time low. And now Final Fantasy XIV and other competitors are closing in. But I don't think this has to be the end of the story for World of Warcraft. What World of Warcraft needs is simpler systems, more content, better community engagement so that the dev teams know what will get players excited to pick up World of Warcraft again. To that end, I have invented a system of my own, a simple system that gives players huge amounts of customization, that lets developers add awesome and useful abilities without fear of spellbar bloat, giving players the ability to upgrade 3 of their spells to be something new. I'm cooking up concepts for 7 of these upgrade spells for every spec. Some of them are returning favorites, some of them are brand new. Either way, Blizzard has my express permission to use every concept I post about in these videos in the comments or on the forums. And if the Blizzard developers are too pressed for time to engage with the community, then I will. I'll get the feedback on this concept, and even if they don't take a single one of my ideas, they'll know what the players want, and most importantly, why. And they can use that to make the game better, because I want this game better. I want WoW to last another decade. Arcane is the last mage spec that I cooked up upgrades for. I should probably say here that a few things about Arcane's fundamental design rubbed me the wrong way. Doing multi-target damage either requires specific talents or else is, weird at best. Arcane Explosion exists and can function as an arcane charge builder for Arcane Barrage, but it's neither ranged nor mana neutral like the Arcane Blast rotation is. Also, the finisher is a de facto multi-target damage ability, even if you're in a single-target fight. All of that rubbed me the wrong way. So I created upgrade abilities with the goal in mind of making the multi-target and single-target rotation seem a bit more elegant, or mutually exclusive. That might sound offhand like it's not so different from setting talents up to fix problems in the baseline, but keep in mind you can swap out upgrade abilities anytime you're out of combat without having to consume any tomes or anything like that. A multi-target fight can have multi-target upgrades in place, while a single-target fight can have single-target upgrades. That's the theory. Some part of me is screaming that I am being hypocritical after just having gotten done writing 2 different parts in the Holy Paladin video script about how I'm putting quality of life improvements into my pet project to try to make it look more appealing to players, when in reality quality of life improvements are probably better added at the baseline, not as part of the new player power system. But then another thought occurred to me, that the end result was basically having one set of upgrades that are optimized for multi-target and another for single-target, and that it's normal for me to have spreads that can be optimized for single-target or multi-target DPS, even for specs that look to me like they're well-designed. Shoot. I am going to need to get feedback from Arcane Mage players about whether this upgrade spread is any good. I tried to use these upgrades to cover the spec's weaknesses, or at least what I thought were its weaknesses. If I was wrong about what the weaknesses were, if I should have added new abilities or unpruned old ones instead of using these upgrades to fix problems, or if I'm just plain not even on the right tracks of thinking, please do let me know. I have every intention of iterating on this, taking player feedback into account, and shamelessly virtue signaling about humility in the hopes that some inkling that it's good to have some humility rubs off on the Blizzard developers at long last, which will backfire and repel the devs from that concept if I get too cringe about it, and I know it, so I really need to quit yakking about context and virtue signaling and get to the actual upgrades already so you can judge how good or bad they are for yourselves. The first upgrade, Sorceress Sphere, an upgrade to Arcane Explosion that launches a projectile that explodes around a target enemy, is mana neutral in its rotation, provides arcane charges, and has no cooldown. The cast time is the same as Arcane Blast, and it is ranged. Number 2, Magic Missile, an upgrade to Arcane Barrage that deals slightly more damage, uses a different projectile, has no cooldown, and only targets one enemy. The Resonance talent simply boosts its damage by a flat %. Number 3, Disintegrate, an upgrade to Arcane Missiles that is still channeled, but it can deal damage to multiple enemies in a line and deal some multi-target splash damage to the target enemy. Number 4, Spellfire Blast, an upgrade to Fire Blast that grants an arcane charge. Actually, there's a lot here that I didn't think through. I will talk about that later. Number 5, Prismatic Nova, an upgrade to Frost Nova that deals significantly more damage, roots targets, and grants an arcane charge. Number 6, Mana Well, an upgrade to Evocation. You can cast while you are using Mana Well, but it grants the same amount of mana, albeit over a longer time. And unless you have the Slipstream talent, you cannot move away from the Mana Well without losing the mana regeneration. And finally, number 7, Prismatic Bind, an upgrade to Slow that deals a blend of arcane and frost damage over time, and ticks of this can trigger clear casting. That last one was me running out of ideas. I figure some of these upgrades can be utility. Heck, upgrading Remove Curse so it can dispel other types of debuffs is one option I might consider if I really start running low on ideas. Though I have to wonder if I should have just copied in the Nullify utility buff from Fire and Frost. Anyway, I should dive into the thinking of the upgrades that I did put in there. First of all, we have seen powerful mages like Jaina and Khadgar throwing purple, glassy-looking spheres of arcane energy around, so I figured at least one upgrade should look like that. Then I found out just how annoying Arcane could be to play when AoE damage is called for, so I decided to upgrade Arcane Explosion so it would be mana neutral and ranged when used like Arcane Blast to deal damage. I figured Arcane Orb looks a bit similar to the spherical projectiles Jaina and Khadgar was using, but not quite the same. Anyhow, Sorcerous Sphere would either deal a little less damage than Arcane Explosion, or it would have a cast time, just to even things out. I'm not sure which one it should be. I'm leaning in the direction of the cast time. Though, I wonder if it would be mana positive with the Reverberate talent. I could use some feedback on that, and just how bad or good it would be to have rotation be mana positive. Now, here's a funny little aside about the naming of this spell. At first, I was going to call it Spellfire Nova. Make it a blend of fire and arcane damage. And then I realized I wanted to have that clear, glassy purple sphere flying around, so I named it Arcanosphere instead, little knowing at the time that there was an Arcanosphere PvP talent. It was a real brain fart on my part not to look at the PvP talents. Just because I don't PvP doesn't mean it's not critical to take PvP talents into account with this project. But if you think that was a brain fart, wait until you hear what I renamed it to after realizing Arcanosphere wouldn't work. Nether Sphere. And it was only during my second examination through these that I realized that's got some anatomical connotations, doesn't it? I was better off with Spellfire Nova. Sorcerous Sphere works pretty well, but ugh. Hope you're at least a little entertained by these brain farts. The realization that I had failed to take PvP talents into account in some cases made me also realize that I need to go through each of these scripts again and see whether the names are taken or whether the PvP talents are already replacing an ability or whatever. And I'm so glad that I caught the connotation before this one flew the coop. Anyhow, on to the next one before I consume this whole video's time with asides and stories and commentary. Magic Missile. Another classic Dungeons & Dragons spell, and I'm a bit sad that it is not in World of Warcraft. I thought about using it as an upgrade for Arcane Blast, but I figure it's a bit more satisfying when these upgrades fundamentally change an ability's purpose a little. And since Arcane Barrage can become multi-target damage with arcane charges, I figured it would be a bit more satisfying overall if its upgrade would be strictly single target. You'd want to keep Arcane Barrage as Arcane Barrage in multi-target situations, but since you can swap upgrades out anytime you're out of combat, I figure this works. And then I saw the Resonance talent and realized I needed to tweak things just a little. Disintegrate is another classic Dungeons & Dragons spell, and there's not much nuance to it other than it's multi-target if you need it. I would be lying if I said the fact that Disintegrate and Magic Missile were also Diablo 3 wizard abilities wasn't part of the reason I was trying to get them into the upgrade system. I am drawing in several Diablo abilities just plain because I think they're cool. Anyhow, I saw how important Evocation is to the Arcane Mage and decided to sneak in some more flexibility while using it, or rather while using its upgrade. Mana Well places a blue recoloring of Light Well on the ground near you, and now you can move a bit and cast other spells while that Mana Well is active. With the Slipstream talent, the Mana Well even follows you around. But once it's summoned, you can cast other spells while your mana is regenerating. The catch is that it takes longer than Evocation to restore your mana. Though, now that I've written all this out, it's occurred to me, one of the things that makes Evocation as taxing as it is that while you're channeling it, you're not casting damage spells. Is taking that weakness out of the picture and turning Mana Well into a sacrifice of only one single global cooldown too much? I think I need some feedback on this one. Well, on the whole spread, obviously, but this in particular. Anyhow, Spellfire Blast was meant to provide Fire Blast a use for Arcane Mages. Plus, I need at least one spell that combines fire and arcane damage without mixing in anything else. I could use some feedback on this concept. Letting the player weave in some other spells during the mana-neutral Arcane Blast, Arcane Barrage rotation seems offhand like it's a fun concept. But should I make it so that Spellfire Blast mixed in with that rotation is still mana-neutral? Should it be slightly mana-negative? Or should it depend on where you cast Spellfire Blast in the rotation, whether it's mana-positive or mana-negative? I mean, feedback would be very much appreciated here. Prismatic Nova is more or less the same story, though it's more like getting an Arcane Charge as a consolation prize for having to spend a global cooldown casting Frost Nova. Frost Nova is not known for its high damage, after all, and while I figure Prismatic Nova would add a decent chunk of damage, for Frost Nova anyway, I also figure it would make much more sense to spend global cooldowns on Arcane Blast or Sorcerous Sphere in a normal DPS rotation, whether that's mana positive or not. Still, Prismatic Nova would look pretty awesome. Prismatic Bind was another one of those cases where I started to run out of ideas. I mean, Arcane Power? Overpowered already buffs that. Arcane Blast? Okay, in retrospect, I realize I could have buffed that into Spellfire Bolt or Arcane Bolt or something like that, either of which would have little if any nuance and just look cool unless someone who isn't me has a brilliant idea for doing something with the mana efficiency. I mean, depending on feedback, I might bring in Spellfire Bolt or Arcane Bolt, or heck, I might turn Magic Missile into an Arcane Blast upgrade. It kind of feels more right. But buffing slow into a damage over time seems a bit cool too. Plus, it helps to have something for Arcane that blends Frost and Arcane damage besides just Prismatic Nova. Is triggering clear casting with this too much? I could use feedback on this. If I'm told utility abilities should stay utility, well, I'll make that happen. But I'd like it if you could give me some suggestions for what to put in Prismatic Bind's place, even if it's just drawing in the Nullify Silencing Interrupt upgrade from Fire and Frost spread of upgrades. There is something that rubs me the wrong way about the finishers, though. With this upgrade system, you lock yourself into having either a single target finisher or a multi-target finisher for the duration of a fight. You can switch which one of those you have in between fights, but the flexibility to either cast a single target finisher or a multi-target finisher is just not there. And so many other specs have that flexibility, and in some ways I feel like it's just not fair that Arcane doesn't. So one concept I'm toying with, and if feedback tells me to do it, I will, is to simply add Magic Missile, or maybe the Magic Missile upgrade renamed to something else, as its own new ability, and then upgrade Arcane Barrage into maybe Arcane Bolt Volley to remove its target cap. Please let me know what you think of this idea. Another thought is maybe retooling Spellfire Blast into a single target finisher. I mean, that's still adding a single target finisher to your kit via the upgrade system, not to mention utterly altering the purpose of the ability. A short-term DPS ability changed into a finisher. I don't know, I could really use feedback on these thoughts. Still another thought was switching Magic Missile to an Arcane Blast upgrade somehow. Maybe the mana cost and damage don't depend on arcane charges, but using Magic Missile the same way you'd use Arcane Blast in the existing rotation would still be mana neutral? Or would that completely eliminate the burn phase? Would altering the way it works so that it has a different mana cost and damage curve and deals more damage and consumes more mana at higher arcane charge levels be better? Feedback, well, you know what I'm going to say. You'd know much better than I whether any of these are good ideas or not. One other thing that kind of rubs me the wrong way is that only 3 of the 7 spells I'm upgrading are actually part of your rotation, and Arcane Explosion's only part of your rotation if you're in a multi-target situation. I mean, Spellfire Blast can add an ability to your rotation in theory, once the details get hashed out, and maybe Prismatic Bind now that I think about it, but when around half the abilities I'm upgrading are snap buttons, situational, or cooldowns, is that a problem? I guess this might simply be a system of Arcane having fewer abilities than most other specs. Another thought that occurs to me is that some of the classes have talents or passives that cause finishers to refund some or all of the resource that they are consuming, like Divine Purpose and Ruthlessness come to mind. There's nothing like that for arcane charges, though. Maybe there shouldn't be, considering how tied into mana those abilities are. I'm guessing Iteration 2 of the Arcane Mage upgrade spread is going to look a lot different from Iteration 1. Please keep the feedback coming so I'll know how to make Iteration 2 good. Now, when I started out with these upgrade concepts, I went ability by ability, not purpose by purpose, if you see what I mean. I asked myself, which abilities exist in this specs kit that I can give an upgrade to? And when I created upgrades based on which abilities I could upgrade, I often aimed for something that I thought looked or sounded cool. Almost always I wanted the upgraded ability to feel at least a little bit different from the original. Often I tried to create some kind of trade-off, making the upgrade situationally useful based on things like the number of targets affected or having a stronger effect with a longer cooldown, things like that. Rarely did I upgrade the same ability more than once for the same spec, but while I was putting together each spread of upgrades, what I didn't do, and what I probably should have done in retrospect, was to figure out what goals a player would have while they're looking at a list of upgrades, and then make sure upgrades exist in the spread that allow the player to pick upgrades that help them achieve those goals. In my next iteration, I plan to have that design goal in mind, to consider what the player wants to accomplish and how they could accomplish it with the upgrades. I strongly suspect that in this next iteration, there will be a lot more cases where I upgrade the same ability in 2 or more different ways. That will give players more options, and since that's going to be the goal with goal-oriented design, who knows? I might even have 3 different upgrades for the same ability in the end. However, I can do this much more effectively in an environment that has a great deal of feedback available, and that's where you come in. You have knowledge that comes from experience with these specs. I don't. I tried to do my research on Wowhead and Icy Veins for each spec, but inevitably there'll be things you know that I don't because you have experience that I don't have. You'll have more and better ideas than I could hope to have, and I know I need those, so please, let me know what you think of these upgrades and what better ideas you have for what to put in their places. Now, looking at Arcane Spread through the lens of how can I use these to achieve this goal, the spells Disintegrate, Sorcerous Sphere, and either Mana Well or Prismatic Nova look like a decent spread for multi-target damage. Heck, the quality of life that Sorcerous Sphere adds alone might make this appealing for Arcane Mages. Then again, is semi-parasitic player power systems really the best way to dispense quality of life benefits to the player? Feedback would be appreciated here. As for single target upgrades, Magic Missile, Spellfire Blast, and either Prismatic Bind or Mana Well look like good upgrades. Actually, I don't know whether Spellfire Blast, Prismatic Bind, or Mana Well is the maybe on this one, and it wouldn't surprise me if the question of which one is the best is going to hinge on the numbers. And I'm not really coming up with numbers as part of Project Decade. Then again, maybe that's okay, and the fact that there are no numbers simply means any one of these upgrades has the potential to be good. So, maybe I did okay this time with the first iteration of upgrades, but Arcane seems like such a complex and nuanced spec that I know it's easy for me to do the wrong thing with it. Heck, even if what I did with it is functional, maybe I got the flavor wrong. I mean, Magic Missile's a pretty basic spell by my understanding, so making it a finisher in my first iteration might have been... what's the word I'm looking for? Tacky? Feedback would be appreciated, and I will iterate and incorporate improvements and fixes as the players point them out. And again, unlike actual Blizzard developers, I am not at all closed to the idea that I'm not even going down the right lines of thinking. I'm almost closed to the idea that I am on the right lines of thinking, as a matter of fact, but not quite. I am creative, I did a bunch of research, but even with all that, it's still possible, nay, probable, that I missed some things. Of course, I know Blizzard probably won't take many, or even any of these suggestions. Heck, they might even have something objectively better in store for us than the semi-borrowed power upgrade system that I've cooked up here. But knowing what gets players excited will be helpful to them even so. That is why I'm sacrificing so much of my free time and energy on Project Decade. And who knows, they might just need these ideas to get WoW going in the right direction. Heck, if this video series just gets the Blizzard developers into the habit of creating a blue post with the thinking in it that goes in depth enough for us to understand what they're doing and what their design goals are, then that would be a huge step forward. Even saying the thinking out loud is sometimes enough to get you a new perspective on what you're doing. Is it really what people want? Does it serve the purposes that it really should be serving in the end? Am I really doing something just to make a system look awesome instead of making the game overall better? What does it do for the fun factor? Am I making the mistake of prioritizing my design goals over the fun factor? Are my design goals the right design goals to have? Do my ideas match the spec's feel and flavor? Is it a net gain? Is it genuinely awesome? Things like that. Plus, we just plain need more communication from Blizzard. If Project Decade gets the development team into the habit of telling us the thinking for every change they make, then the whole project will have been worth it, even if they don't take a single suggestion. Again, if you see something you don't like bad trade-offs or something you know is counterproductive or useless, or if you've thought of an idea that's better or cooler or more useful than mine, then don't hesitate to let me know. The more details you can provide about why you don't like it and what makes one of my ideas counterproductive or useless, or about why your idea is cooler or more useful than mine, the better. One of the main goals of Project Decade is to give whoever's in charge of class design and player power systems a good idea what appeals to players and what will actually get them excited to get back to WoW again. And the more you can say about the wherefore and the why, the better. I fully intend to iterate on this project and make changes in response to feedback. I know I'm going to make mistakes. Heck, I've already seen mistakes in some of the things that I've done. But if those mistakes generate the kind of discussion that Blizzard needs to hear, so much the better. Blizzard needs to see player engagement, humility, and feedback actually making change in action so they can start doing what needs to be done to turn WoW around. It can be done and it should be done. World of Warcraft can last another decade. So keep the feedback coming, folks. There's one last thing. I began working on Project Decade videos back in July, and considering how many months it has taken, the fact that there are 36 different sets of feedback to curate and compile, and multitudes of decisions to make based on feedback received, ideas others have come up with, and how to weave everything together into a fun, functional, and exciting whole, I don't have a chance in the tramaculum of getting this done in any reasonable length of time unless I get volunteers to help me curate and compile the feedback I'm getting. If you're willing to help curate feedback, please let me know. If I get enough interest, I will set up a Discord server where we can coordinate everything. Thank you in advance for your feedback and support. Let's make World of Warcraft the best game that it can be.